All right, everyone. Welcome into episode 29 of Without a Mic. We are one short of 30, and I'm 29, so I'll be 30 this year, so I'm feeling it. But we've got Mikk Berger back, a longtime friend of the show. He was on episode 2 last year on one of our most successful episodes ever. We were talking about success as one of our life topics, so we're super excited to have him back. We've got me, Roger Baugh, and Spencer Cook as always. Today we've got a review of the Kenobi show. So this will contain spoilers, so if you haven't finished it, finish it if you care about that. But otherwise, we're going to get into this. We've got a lot of opinions about it. This has been one of Disney's biggest, most watched, most anticipated shows that they've done on Disney Plus since it's come out. So we've got a lot to say, but I'll let Spencer introduce it.
Yeah, so this is exciting. I mean, first of all, having a guest is always exciting. Having Mikk on after it's been, 27 episodes, it's pretty awesome. Yep. A lot has changed over that time period. And you're taking 3 guys who are not die-hard Star Wars fans. You're taking 3 guys who enjoy Star Wars to give a very logical opinion, maybe non-logical opinions. I don't know. So we'll find out. But so Obi-Wan Kenobi, opinions. They are opinions. That's what we can kind of narrow it down to. So Obi-Wan Kenobi, directed by Deborah Chow, all 6 episodes, which is actually different according to, Boba Fett and The Mandalorian, which were directed by multiple individuals. Of course, we see Ewan McGregor come back as Obi-Wan, Hayden Christensen come back as Darth Vader, and then a couple new individuals. However, to your point, this was the biggest show on Disney Plus, period. It's the biggest show that's ever happened, it's ever hit, and with all of the Marvel things going on, it's pretty impressive. However, there are a lot of mixed reviews. I think this came in as probably one of the most polarizing shows, not only on Disney Plus, but maybe just in general as of 2022. So let's dive into it. I think before we go through pros and cons, I think we should kind of just share our initial thoughts. What did you guys think?
Yeah, Mikk, let's have you start.
Yeah, I guess I'll take the hot seat before I hear anything from you guys. First of all, thanks for having me on the podcast again. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to be here today. I've listened to a lot of your podcast episodes before this. So is my wife, and we love you guys. And you guys know you're my best friends. So I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to talk about Kenobi because, I feel like this show. They really marketed it as this, and succeeded to make it the show that every Star Wars fan, big or small, could really love. Because I feel like a lot of the time with Mandalorian and Boba Fett, it was such a different story. And I know Boba Fett, it was still part of the original trilogy, but it was still such a story on its own that some fans either loved it or some fans either hated it. But Kenobi was marketed as, hey, if you loved all the original stuff, this is straight that, it's going to be your favorite characters. You're going to get Kenobi and Vader back together. We're going to market this hard to all of the original fans, and anybody who is a fan of the first 6 movies should be a fan of this series. And I think they succeeded. I feel like they took a long time to make Kenobi again, and that's probably my biggest critique. And I'll let you guys speak more to that as well, because I feel like we share that opinion. But overall, closing out, especially with the amazing last episode, I think overall it really captured that original love for the first 6 movies that we've been missing for a while. So that's my overall take.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot to unpack with this show. I think you made a great point. I think this was the most anticipated show, maybe of the year. That's probably arguable. I know we have Stranger Things and The Boys, and there's some big shows. We've got Game of Thrones later this year, but I think the hype, and especially that first trailer. With the Duel of the Fates music, it seemed like they were we're going all in. This is going to be the greatest thing you've ever seen, and it wasn't. For me, I think they're so. I have a couple problems with the show. I think it didn't really have an identity. I think that was its first problem. Like, I think it was too long, and I think that's something that like Mick said, you know, the most common thing I heard after the first 5 episodes was, man, I hope the next one will be better. And that's not a good thing to hear in a show. Like, you don't, like, if I was like, hey, go watch this show, it's 6 episodes, the first 5, you're going to hope that the next one gets better. And the 6th one will be good, but it won't be amazing consistently. Like, I don't know, is the juice worth the squeeze? That's kind of my, like, thought on this. I think they should have made this a movie, make it an hour and a half, cut out all the filler stuff, because it felt like it was like, let's get this final fight scene. That was the goal of the show, is to get to that fight scene. But it was like 10 minutes of the 6-episode show. So it's like, we're just filling up time getting there. And like Mick said, you know, it took a while for Kenobi to be Kenobi. He's kind of just bumming around. He's depressed. He's mopey, which is fine. You know, I'm not critiquing that, but it's like, it took us 5, in my opinion, bad episodes to get to one that was cool, but I don't know if it was even that good. And I'm looking at this as like, where's the character development? Like, what was the conflict? Because for me, the biggest thing was none of these characters were at risk at all. Luke was never at risk. Leia was never at risk. Anakin was never at risk. Obi-Wan was never at risk. And Reva, like, I think it was after episode 4, Disney comes out and says Reva's getting her own show. So now Reva's not at risk because she's got a sequel coming. So it's like, all these characters, whatever happens, there's no tension. And that's something that was apparent to me watching the show. Like, you know no one's going to die. You know no one's going to get maimed or seriously injured. So it's just like, okay, so there's no conflict. It's taking forever to get to these points. And I felt like the writing was just very all over the place, and kind of a lot of these characters, like Reva, I thought was a horrible character. I thought she was so forced, and she was so boring. And the problem was, she was standing next to Vader the whole show. So it's like, if this show had been about her, they could have made her more intimidating. But she always acted intimidating, and then Darth Vader stepped in and it was like, no, yeah, that's the real villain. So it just really watered her down. So I don't know. I feel like I'm very overly negative about this show, but I feel like it's just because we deserved better. Like, from that first trailer with Duel of the Fates, like, it came in, Spencer, and I remember talking to Spencer, and we were like, we've watched this like 10 times. Like, this trailer is amazing.
I still watch it, by the way.
Same, yeah. That's arguably the best part of the show, was that Duel of the Fates trailer. Like, for me, like, because I got the most feels from that. And then I went into the show and I watched it because I had high hopes for it. And then it was like, maybe the next episode will be better. Maybe the next episode will be better. And then we get to the end and it's like, yeah, we got a cool 10-minute fight scene, but it's over. Like, it didn't really live up to my expectations, which was, this is going to be an amazing experience. And it was just a long, drawn-out experience that had a cool few moments, but ultimately was very lackluster, in my opinion. So I know I've talked quite a bit, but Spencer, let's get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I feel like with TV shows and movies, it's such a clear-cut path to, like, dissect it, and this one is not. Like, this one is genuinely not one of those. And I remember after each episode, you know, I'll tell the audience from the beginning, Roger was not about it from episode 1 all the way through. And I liked
episode 1.
Oh yeah, it was episode 2
that was my favorite episode.
Sorry, episode 2 and on. So I will say, in regards to the season as a whole, I think that's how we now need to look at it, rather than
agreed
by each episode, because it was so easy to go each episode and say, this sucked, oh, that was okay, oh, this sucked, oh, that was great, you know? And so now, dissecting it as a whole 6-episode series, how did Kenobi do? In my opinion, it had 3 awful episodes and it had 3 good episodes. I thought it hit on nostalgic aspects, but I thought the writing was so incredibly poor that they stretched it so far, right? I mean, this was originally written as a movie. Before it was changed into a TV series. It was written as a movie. They completely scrapped the script because Jon Favreau said it was too much like The Mandalorian, which it still was. You had the Obi-Wan Leia circumstance, just like you had Mandalorian Grogu. It's the same exact circumstance. However, to your point, I think they put way too much filler. You know, there's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of, you know, him being this bummy guy for 4 of the 6 episodes is not why we wanted to watch Obi-Wan Kenobi. Maybe 2 episodes to build him up in this circumstance that he's in, but not for 4 of the 6 episodes. So I think the writing was very apparent. You know, I don't even know if that actress for Reva is a good actress or not. She might actually be good, but her writing was so bad for that character that she ended up not being a good character. And so I will say this is such a, in my opinion, like a letdown, but not because it's so bad, but because my expectations were so high that it was a disappointment. However, I will say it provided one of the best scenes in Star Wars history, in my opinion, ever. Star Wars history in Episode 6. So that is one major pro that I have, is that scene with Anakin Skywalker, half Anakin, half Darth Vader. There's a lot to that, not just their dialogue with each other, but you also had the blue color and the red color mix and mingling, so you knew when Anakin was talking, and then you knew when Vader was talking, and they went really deep with it. So that was definitely one thing that was like, whoa, this is kind of what I wanted. However, it didn't mask, episode 2 and 3. I think episode 3 was probably one of the worst episodes I've seen in TV history. It didn't mask those. Mm-hmm. So I think there are some pros and cons to nail into, but I think overall, I'm glad I watched it, and I think I might go back and watch like episode 6 again, periodically, but I don't see myself ever rewatching this as like a Star Wars marathon. I have to, whereas I would watch episode 2, Attack of the Clones, even though it's terrible, I would watch that again in line with all the other Star Wars movies. So kind of a big letdown, but only because my expectations were so high.
It's probably a good thing I came on the podcast today, because I might be going pro Kenobi, and you guys might be.
That's great. No, and that's what I want to hear. Like,
because honestly, okay, here's my take, and I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. I think that I just get over those things very easily, just from my point of view. So, like I think all of what you're saying is valid, and I actually kind of agree with Spencer of there being like 3 good episodes and 3 bad episodes. But I think the reason why I liked it is Rach and I sort of watched it as a movie, to be honest. Like, I know you guys were watching like every week, and Spencer would talk to me all the time, because I watched the first 2 episodes of Spencer, and then I watched the 3rd episode of Spencer a week later, and then I stopped watching it because my wife wasn't watching it until it all came out. And then once it all came out last Wednesday, my wife and I just binged it this weekend, like all 6 episodes in a row, basically. And so we kind of watched it from front to back. And so those middle portions where there were some rough episodes, I feel like I glanced past that pretty easily, because I was so looking forward to the conclusion of the story, which is episode 6, which I absolutely loved. And I think a lot of it, I feel like the 3 good episodes are the 3 episodes, well, 1, of course, where you're introducing everyone, and you're seeing Kenobi back at it, and your anticipation for the lightsaber to come out, like all of those different things, and then the episodes with Vader, like that's about it. But then there's like 3 episodes where Vader's barely in it, and Vader really made the show. Right. I just feel like as a whole, like it was like, it definitely should have been a movie. I totally agree with you on that. It should have been shorter, cut out that filler, and then make it more the Kenobi versus Vader that I enjoyed out of the 3 episodes that were good. Right?
Wait, I got a point. I want to say something here, because I think you made a very important point, because you watched it as a movie, right?
I basically did, yeah.
We watched it as a TV series, which, my question is, if Disney Plus allowed everybody to watch this without waiting, would we be as critical? Maybe, maybe we would be, but would we not be? Because I promise you, I would have binged it all. I would have watched all 6 episodes in one go. That's how much I wanted to see this series. Whereas with others, I don't care if they make me wait a week. Like, I'll be honest, Euphoria made me wait a week, and I was dying. I wanted to see it. But maybe that's another testament to how good their writing was compared to Kenobi. But then again, I don't know. If Kenobi was written as a movie, or as like a TV series that I could watch like a movie in Mick's regard, then maybe I would have had a different emotion to it.
Yeah, I think they chose to do it as a TV show, and I think it was a mistake. I think it sounds like we can all agree on that it would have been better off as a movie, cut out the fluff, cut out the filler. While I appreciated what they tried to do with Luke and Leia, which was basically fan service, I felt like they were totally irrelevant to the story. Like they added nothing, and I think Leia and Reva were, in my opinion, the worst part of the show, because they were the ones who those characters bore the brunt of the bad writing. Because Leia, the first episode, she's very elegant, she's psychologically discombobulating her cousin, and then the next episode, she's acting like a child. So it's like one episode she acts like she's 30. One episode she acts like she's 10, and she just swings back and forth. And it's like, okay, you're either a genius child who's like super sophisticated, or you're a child. Like, what is it? And I feel like Reva too. It was like, I'm very passionate, or I'm like calculated. And it's like it was just swingy back and forth just to keep the story going. And I think to your point, Mick, like if you take them out, you make it about Kenobi and Vader, which is what we wanted. And it really wasn't about that until the last episode. And even the little scene in episode 3 where they sort of have that confrontation and he lights him on fire and stuff, it was just like, well, you know they're not going to do anything right now because there's a big fight scene at the end. So it just felt watered down, like they tried to tease it too much, and it was like, you should have just leaned into it. Like, give us like 2-3 fight scenes. You know, give us a big epic ending, but build to it instead of like holding everything back and then giving us a taste at the end and then ending it. So I think that was a big miss for them, because we would have liked to see more Vader, and he really wasn't in it that much. And they tried to make Reva sort of take that conflict, but when her like character arc developed, it felt super lackluster to me. It's like, okay, you were a youngling, like now you want to kill other people because people were killed that you knew? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, and then she gets stabbed, and of course she survives. And then her going to get Luke at the end, like, it just felt like that was completely unnecessary. It's like, okay, why is this a problem? Because she's not going to kill Luke. We already know Luke lives, and we know she's probably going to have a come-to moment. And it just kind of felt like, okay, why are we seeing this? Like, give us more Kenobi and Vader. But they tried so hard to make us like Reva. I didn't like her at all. You know, Leia, it was like, you're super competent, you're incompetent, you're super competent, you're incompetent. I don't know. It just felt like those characters were like get them out of here and let us see who we really want to. But I felt like they clogged up a lot of the show and the story, and those were some of the worst parts for me when it really focused on them. And also, how does no one die from a lightsaber anymore? Like the Grand Inquisitor, he's like, "Hey, I was behind the glass the whole time," and then Reva's like, "Hey, you know, I know Darth Vader stabbed me after destroying me, but you know, I'm gonna run over and chase down Luke."
If Darth Maul can get cut in half and still live, I think that trend is, you know, continuing to go.
Or Anakin, right?
Wait, let me. So I need to correct myself. I need to correct myself. It was not episode 3. It was episode 4. That was absolutely terrible. Episode 3, there were some moments, because it was the episode after the Darth Vader Obi-Wan.
Oh, it's the one where they rescue her, right? From the
yeah. It was so like it was terrible. But I want to touch on your point with Leia, because in my opinion, I thought her relationship with Obi-Wan, according to the story they wrote, was absolutely vital. Now, I wish they would have moved a little bit away from the whole Mandalorian parent type thing, but I think to their story, that was vital. But I do agree that her mannerisms, I think, were so poorly written. So I think the relationship was great. I love seeing the way that Obi-Wan was kind of like a father figure to her in this perspective. And he kind of had the bridge between her real parents and then, you know, and then her life now, because he's the one who kind of delivered that. And so I liked that relationship, but I do agree. I think her mannerisms were terrible.
It's funny. I feel like I'm going to be devil's advocate this whole show, because I fully agree with the Reva. Reva. How do you say it?
I think it's Reva.
Yeah, Reva.
Okay, Reva. Well, we'll say Reva. With the Reva take, I hated Reva, but I feel like I looked past her most of the time because I was like, oh, nothing's going to come of this, and she's just too passionate. We all know how that goes, and she's going to die in it. It'll be fine. And that's what I thought anyway. I was like, it'll be okay. I'm looking for Vader, and I somewhat appreciated the Leia moments, and maybe it's because I thought she was inconsistent, but I feel like that's being a kid, like that's being a 10-year-old kid, where there's certain things you know a lot more about, and there's certain things where you are a child and you are so naive and you have no idea what's going on. And I definitely think the writing could have been better, but I think I look past a lot of that because I just saw her as like this, the Leia that we all know from the previous movies. Like, we've never seen her as a child, and this was our first opportunity to do that. And I saw like the bright moments of her like being a rebel, you know, like the actual definition of a rebel, of like her going out into the woods and like defying her parents a little bit, and always having her fun little droid. And then when she got with Kenobi, like she's not very trusting of other people, because I mean, she doesn't even know who her real parents are, you know, like who would trust somebody at that point, you know, like all these little things. I totally understand where you're coming from, but I think I glanced past a lot of that because I was viewing that as like, just, she's a kid and she can act that way because she's going to be really smart and really intelligent about these things that she's really strong at. And she's going to be really stupid, and she's going to be a 10-year-old girl that runs away from Kenobi in the middle of this big, huge city, you know, and it's so dumb. You're like, what are you doing? You know, but I feel like I liked Leia more than you guys probably did. And I especially liked her relationship with Kenobi, especially at the end. Like, I feel like the very last moment, and I feel like I keep on sounding like the ends justify the means of like, I just feel like I loved the last episode so much that I glanced past a lot of this. But like the moment with her and Kenobi at the end, I really enjoyed, where Kenobi didn't tell her who her parents were, but he gave her information that she had been seeking. And then she literally walks back to her parents and is like, oh, I'm an Organa, you know, and this is who I am. And I don't need anything else. But thank you for that information. And she has this relationship with Kenobi that we know ends up helping the rebels in the end when she's older. So that's my take.
I just think as like, because I don't think you're wrong in your points. First, I'll say it again. I think the relationship between Leia and Obi-Wan to the story that they wrote was absolutely vital. I think it's the direction of the show. It's the whole reason why Obi-Wan even put himself out there as a Jedi again. And so to their story, it was absolutely vital. I think that I'm feeling this trend, you know, when there's a reason why The Mandalorian is so well represented and why Boba Fett wasn't, why Obi-Wan is kind of polarizing, you know, half people love it, half people hate it. I think it's because, like, The Mandalorian was so out of nowhere, at least to us as an audience member. Jon Favreau could treat that like his project any way he wanted to. He could say, hey, I need another 6 months. Is Disney going to say no? Like, probably not, because it's the first Star Wars TV series, and nobody knows this character. Whereas with Boba Fett, I felt like it was all rushed writing. With Obi-Wan, even though they had 18 years or whatever it was, like, it felt like rushed writing. It felt like they were trying to produce content so fast because they knew they could. Whereas if in let's just say 2017 or so, if they were, you know, told, hey, you can make an Obi-Wan series, I need you to start writing it now, but you'll have until 2022, I think they could have put together a really good script, whereas I feel like they announced it in 2018 or 2019, COVID happened, so nobody did anything, at least I know they did, but it just doesn't feel like they did. And then it felt like they all got together and wrote a script in like a month and then said, cool, now let's go make it in 6 months. It just felt really rushed to me. So I do think, going back to our beginning points, I completely agree with Roger. I think the movie aspect might have actually solved all the writing issues. I think if they were able to condense it to a 2-hour film, then we would not be talking about all the fluff and the in-between moments and all those kind of writing aspects that we were like, hey, that's completely terrible. Hey, you know, I remember Roger ending a episode and then messaging me saying, well, yep, still terrible. You know, so like, it's those moments that I don't think would have happened so predominantly if it was a film and, you know, rather than a spread out TV series.
Yeah, I think so. Thinking about it, you know, I think the biggest factor in all of this is, and we've said this already, but is expectations, right? And I think a reason why The Mandalorian was so successful is because no one knew anything about it, you know, other than a certain, you know, deep Star Wars lore, you know, people that know that stuff, who know what Mandalorians are. But when you see The Mandalorian, you're like, okay, it kind of looks like Boba Fett. And then you go into it, you have no expectations. And they actually, I think, did a really good job with the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. I think it's a solid show. You know, it has its flaws. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I think of all the Star Wars shows they've done, I think most people would say that that's overall the best one. You know, it's got a lot of cool things in it, but they don't have any expectations going into that, so they don't feel I guess, pressure. And I feel like with Obi-Wan there was so much pressure because you're taking on, the big challenge, which is you're going with original characters from the original movies, and you're bringing them back. So now, how are you going to do that? How are you going to live up to those expectations? And the other thing was, the last time we saw these characters was in arguably the best scene in Star Wars, which is Anakin fighting Obi-Wan on Mustafar. And so, for me, like, going into this, that was my biggest concern was, okay, how are they going to, pay homage to that scene without trying to one-up it, but also making it good in its own way? And I will say that fight scene, I think those 8 minutes of fight scene, I think they did a good job. I think it could have been a little bit better because it felt like Vader just crushed Obi-Wan and then he was like, I'm going to power up now, let's go. And then he just reversed it instantly, and I think that was a part of the writing. They made him so beat down for so much of the show that when he powered up, it felt like it was too quick, in my opinion. But that aside, that was sort of my biggest concern. And I think Kenobi reminds me, I was like, what does this remind me of? Something I've seen lately. And you know what it reminds me of is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And I think the reason why is because
Don't
Disney,
hit me with this. Don't hit me with this.
I think the reason why, and Spencer and I weren't fans of this, but hear me out. I think the reason why is that they're a little bit too beholden to cameos now. I think Disney with Marvel and Star Wars has moved a little too far into the cameos thing, because I think, we've seen Luke Skywalker showing up at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian was huge. That was a massive, massive moment, and it was meaningful and it made sense. And I think in Spider-Man No Way Home, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, Spider-Man showing up was huge and it made sense. And I think what in this case and in Multiverse of Madness, what they tried to do was they tried to use the cameo for the sake of a cameo to carry that favor with the audience. And it didn't feel as fulfilling because it wasn't set up and as natural. And so I feel like with the show, they were like, okay, what are we going to do with Obi-Wan? We can't kill him. We can't kill Vader. Let's bring in Luke and Leia. And it was like, we're going to rely on Leia to kind of get you through these slow parts so we can get to this big moment. And I feel like in Doctor Strange, it was like, let's bring in the Illuminati and all these characters you love just to get you through the slow parts so that we can get to this big scene. But really, they didn't, it wasn't as satisfying as it could have been. And I guess, the solution to that is what Taika Waititi is doing, which is he's going to do a Star Wars show with no legacy characters. So it's going to be like Rogue One, sort of, where it's just completely new cast, completely new story, no ties to anything. And I think that'll work. I think that's what we need more of now. And I think Disney's taking on a harder challenge of trying to fill in these holes and gaps in the existing story and Spencer and I have talked about this before too, but you can go back in time, like the Old Republic days, because there's just thousands of years of history there that you can explore, and that would be really cool. And you can go way past it or in different directions, but they keep saying, let's go back and fill in the gaps here, let's go back and fill in the gaps here, which I get it, because we want to see these characters, but at the same time, you put so many restrictions on yourself when someone like Taika Waititi can come in and just create something that's really innovative without any expectations or any restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, well said. There's a lot to take out from that, but I will say don't ever compare anything to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, because that movie is so bad.
Agreed. That movie is trash. Trash.
No, you did have some good. You had some good comparison points, though. I will give it to you. Just so you know, to enhance your point, Kevin Feige came out and said that the only reason why John Krasinski was in Doctor Strange as Mr. Fantastic is because it was a fanfare. The fans wanted it.
It was fan service.
There's quite a popular rumor that he actually won't be Mr. Fantastic in their Fantastic Four movie, because he was the Fantastic, Mr. Fantastic for that universe or whatever. So I don't know. I think a couple things that I really latched onto when I left the show. I was like, yes, I know I had this interesting roller coaster of a journey with liking the show, with not liking the show, with moments that I liked and moments I disliked. However, even though it was only in spurts, seeing peak Darth Vader was incredible. seeing him absolutely just destroy people, you know, literally pull down a ship. Like, that's what we need to see. So I think, I don't know, maybe we don't agree on this, but I fully think that they should do a Darth Vader spinoff and dive into his character as peak Darth Vader. We've never seen him in a full capacity. We've only seen these spurts, you know, whether it's in Rogue One, whether it's in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Like, we've only seen spurts of that. And so that was awesome. I also do think, as a fanfare or maybe nostalgia, because that's kind of the generation we live in, I think they hit on it. You know, to be honest, at the end, overarching, when I go back and look over everything, I think the nostalgia was there. I just don't think the complexity and the detail like they did in the original 3 films. You know, like episode 5 is so good because of the detail that they enhanced from the first one. So I think that kind of overshadows the nostalgic aspect a little bit. However, to, you know, Mick's point, you know, if you watch this all the way through, you might thoroughly enjoy it. However, if you watch it one episode at a time and go, you know, you're really going to start to analyze. Honestly, Mick, I think if you watched it, you know, 1 week at a time, you would have said, yeah, you know, Reva's character was so poor in this. I don't know why, you know, this was happening, with whatever the case may have been. And maybe you wouldn't have, but I think the more time you have to think on these aspects, the more you're going to. And you know, Roger and I had that. You know, we watched these by the week, so we had all this time to dissect it. Whereas if I watched it all the way through, maybe I would start thinking about that, you know, weeks after or months after, but not in the moment. So I don't know. I'm happy I watched it, but I don't know if I'm going to watch it again.
I think that I honestly think Disney Star Wars is leaning in too much to people like me. let me explain. Like I feel like my wife and I are the perfect audience for what Disney and Star Wars is trying to achieve. They're like, yeah, it's Star Wars. Give them some cool lightsaber fights. Give them some good nostalgia. They'll love it. Like, and I feel that way. I'm like, yes, like, please. I want to see the characters that I love. I want to see this. I fully agree with you that I think making these original stories or going back in history and like doing something different would be really, really awesome, like they did with Mandalorian. And Mandalorian was so successful. So why wouldn't they do something that was so new and original? But I also think that, like, most people are going to watch this show and enjoy it. Like, that's my opinion. Is I feel like anybody who likes Star Wars, who's a little kid at heart, who played with a little plastic lightsaber as a kid and pretended to be a Kenobi or pretended to be Vader or pretended to be your favorite Jedi at the time, like, you're going to get through this show and you're going to hit episode 6 and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so cool to see them battling again, you know? And that's how I feel. Like, I just genuinely feel like happy to see it back on screen again. And I think that's why I give a lot of forgiveness for some of the other things like Reva and the poor writing and the fluff that was put into this. But I think it's a good point, like, not just with this show, but I feel like a lot of the Star Wars shows, and probably I wouldn't be surprised if the next few Star Wars shows that they do, Disney is making the mistake of just relying on, oh, people are going to like it either way because it's Star Wars, you know? And I might get sick of that. I didn't really like Boba Fett because of the poor writing and because of so many other things. But like, I feel like this one was different for me because it was Vader and Kenobi and Leia and Luke, you know, and that was enough for me where I was like, okay, I can get into this. I can see it happening. And then the amazing battle at the end is just like, I feel like if the battle wasn't there and we were looking at the first 5 episodes, I would have an entirely different opinion than I do. I just feel like the last, like, 10-minute fight scene, like, really just got me so hyped about this show. And I also, like, literally finished it Sunday, so 2 days ago. So maybe I have some recency bias as well, where I'm like, I've gone back on YouTube and watched that fight scene like 7 or 8 times now. But I feel like literally Disney is looking at everybody and they're going, oh yeah, most people are going to be like Mick, and they're going to love, they're going to forgive us for all the other stuff, and they're going to love the show because of the nostalgia reasons, instead of going, you know what, let's make an amazing story with amazing writing, with amazing acting, and then also bring in everybody who also loves Star Wars. I definitely think they're relying on it a little bit too much. I'm falling into the trap, just rightfully so.
No, and I think their audience has changed, right? I think, and another thing to keep in mind too is like I grew up with the prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3. So like as a kid, I watched those and like they were, episodes 1 and 2 had a lot of shortcomings. They were very cheesy, very like silly, and there were some great moments in there. Obviously, Duel of the Fates. At the end of Attack of the Clones, there's some cool moments, fight scenes. In my opinion, the best Star Wars content that's been made is Episode 3, Episode 6, and then Rogue One. And I don't think it's really close after that. And I think the reason why those are so good is because it's the maximum amount of conflict, and it's the maximum amount of like the best of what Star Wars is. And when I went into Kenobi, I was hopeful that I would get something like that. And as cool as that fight scene was, there were no stakes. There was no risk because we knew that both those characters were going to walk away. And even though that was still true for Episode 3, like Anakin got maimed, like he got messed up, and that there was some risk there still. And so I think a Vader show would be a great way to go because Obi-Wan has a cap. He has a limit for how much he can progress. Because he's still going to be an old hermit in the desert at the end of the day. Like, that's his fate. Darth Vader, he's got a completely different path, and he's got way more mobility as far as how evil and awful he can be. But at the same time, I almost don't want Disney to, like, show me all of Vader, because he's kind of immortalized. Spencer, I've talked about this recently, but I would say it's fair to call him one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic villains of all time. But part of the reason why I think that works is because it's all like peripheral. Like you never actually see it. It's just inferred so much that you just assume it. And he is super intimidating with that, with his armor and all that stuff. And he has these iconic moments, but it's more like your mind fills in the gaps and you create the mantra around him. But if they show you, if they lay it out, if they don't trust the audience and they just lay it out and be like, okay, here's all the reasons why he's bad, I think it'll lose some of its luster, because then you'll just be like, well, this is now what I associate with Vader. And I think they have a lot more to play with Vader. I think if you take Kenobi out and make him have a story with someone else that can die and that is expendable, where he has no restrictions, because he's not going to catch Leia, he's not going to kill Kenobi, he's not going to find Luke. And those were all sort of the things that were supposed to make you feel on edge in this show. But none of them were ever going to happen. So you knew that. But I think if you take Vader, take the chains off, and let him run wild, I know they'd never do this, but I think it should be like rated TV-14, mature, R. Like if you could go down that route, which they would never do, it would alienate too much of the audience. But that would be like peak Vader. Like just let him be unleashed and go ham with no restrictions and no other ties to the rest of the Star Wars universe. I think that's really what we want. And that's sort of what I was hoping to see a little bit more of in the show. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, either Kenobi's going to beat you or he's going to run away, because neither of you is going to die. So I think that's where we're moving towards. Is like, I think there will be a Vader show. I think that's going to happen. I'm just hopeful that they consider sort of that context when it comes to Vader, which I don't think they really did with this show. Vader was cool, and I know they'd originally thought of using Darth Maul in this show as the villain, and they wanted to go bigger, but I almost wish they had gone with Darth Maul, because then you could have done more with him, I think, because you don't know his fate as much, even though he's been in Clone Wars. So I think that's sort of what I was expecting and what I didn't get, which led me to disappointment. But I think your points are super valid, and I think Disney's moving into like, let's bring back these characters. People love them. People will watch. But I think it could have been so much better. Like it could have been Rogue One. It could have been Episode 3. But it felt a lot more like Episode 1.
Yeah, look, this is the most marketable brand in movie history, right? Star Wars is such a marketable brand, and I'll be the first one to say, and it's first of all, it's awesome to have somebody on who has a completely different opinion, because none of our opinions are right. They're just our opinions, right? So like, I could say, hey, I didn't like it for this reason and this reason. Somebody's like, no, I actually thought the writing was perfect. I thought, I thought Reva was the best actor in the show. Like that, somebody will probably feel that somewhere in the world. But I do think, to your point about Darth Vader, the reason why he is so predominant, which kind of gives me a little bit of hesitation on them doing a Darth Vader spinoff, is think of Michael Jordan. How often do you see Michael Jordan doing any interview, any podcast, any appearance? You would never see him. Like literally, he only makes himself available for the biggest things. So he'll speak at his Hall of Fame speech. He'll speak at Kobe Bryant's funeral. But like, you won't see him speaking unless it's really big. And so now we still consider him and Jordan Brand this untouchable aspect. You know, that's kind of Darth Vader. So the more we showcase Darth Vader, the more we might actually move away from that. And so that does scare me a little bit. However, I don't think that it's a problem for how they're writing this. I think that there's an aspect where you could say, hey, if you like Star Wars, this is going to be phenomenal. If you love it, I think you're going to hate it. That could be the perspective that you look at, right? Like if you're a diehard Star Wars fan, you might hate this or you might love it. And if you're a subpar Star Wars fan like me, you might love it or you might hate it. And that might be the scale, one or the other. But I don't think there really is one. You know, I think this was an entertaining show. I thought it had its flaws. I thought it wrapped up really well. I mean, the best content they saved for last. And they started off the show with good content. It just seems like they got the meat wrong and they got the bread on point. That's kind of how I saw it, you know. So I'm happy I saw it. I'm excited to see what Star Wars comes out with further. I'm very excited for Taika Waititi's project. He doesn't seem to miss, but that's pretty much my review of Obi-Wan.
I think it would be really, really cool to see a Vader movie. I have the same reservations that you guys do of like the possibility of it ruining it. I totally agree that Darth Vader is like the icon because of that mystery that you kind of imagine for yourself of like, oh, this guy's got it, you know, but it's never quite shown, but it's always behind the scenes, like implied how evil he is. I think what they should do, they should make a Vader film, like a movie, call it just Vader, and make it like a Logan, like where they went all out, they make it rated R, like full on, and just like lean fully into the villain. And I don't know, I'm not a writer, but I'm sure that they could create some sort of story with stakes, because I mean, Logan is a hero and Vader's a villain, but. And you would have to give Vader some sort of likable quality, or else it would just be a murder fest all movie. But like I feel like they could really lean into something really cool and make like a hour 45, 2 hour movie, and like make it like legitimately scare some audience members. I would love that.
I think that's why I like that scene in episode 6 is because we saw the human side of Vader in Anakin. Yeah. So to your point, if they did a project, I think the Anakin side would be the good side that people could attach to and relate to and humanize with. And then the Vader side is where the entertainment comes from, right? Like just the outrageous hate and whatever the case is with Vader's character. I think that could possibly work, but I think the risk is very high.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with Anakin, because he's the main character of Star Wars. Star Wars is about Anakin's journey through life as Anakin, as Darth Vader, you know, his redemption at the end. And so throughout the entire experience as Vader, which you don't see as much in the original trilogy until episode 6, is that conflict which Luke calls him out on. He's like, I can see the good in you, the conflict. And he still denies it because he's trying to push down the hate and the pain and all that stuff. And I think his internal struggle is something that is really cool to explore. That was one of the highlights, I think, of that scene. Even more so than the fighting, I think, was that the delving into the conflict, where Obi-Wan still tries to appeal to him like one last time, like, hey, you know, Anakin, like, and Anakin shoves it down again, like, but it's still there. It's never gone. It's always there. And I think that was honestly the best part of the entire, 6 episodes, was that small conversation between them, because that's what it showcased. And I think if you did a Vader show and focused more on that with, showcasing him in his full power, I think that's the right way to do it, because that would be consistent with the Vader that we know, and just sort of showcasing that internal struggle with him. But I mean, I know there's comic series and there's books been written about Darth Vader and what he's done. One of them that I'm just aware of is that after Episode 4, when the Death Star blows up, he crash lands on a planet and commits genocide and kills everything on the planet. So like things like that are what I would expect to see. Like give me a Darth Vader genocide. Like that's sort of what I would have to see. It has to be extreme. It has to be like massive. But there would have to be some conflict there. So I think that's the only way to do it. But I think I would rather have had that than the Kenobi show. Like if they had just left Kenobi alone and just done a Darth Vader show, I think that would have been better. And it was cool to see them interact again, but I almost don't know if it was necessary, because from what I've heard from both of you, this is something that you would either go back and watch just Episode 6 or you'd go on YouTube and watch that one scene. But I don't think anyone's rewatching the whole show, let alone the first 5 episodes at least. And that's a shame. You know, I wish it was a show that I wanted to rewatch. I wouldn't rewatch Boba Fett. I think there were a lot of flaws with that as well. But it was just for how big the brand and the name and the characters they were bringing back. I wish it was a show that I wanted to rewatch, because I'll rewatch the Star Wars movies. I'll rewatch Lord of the Rings. You know, I've rewatched Harry Potter. You know, there's a lot of these iconic brands. But for this, I would not rewatch it, other than probably a 10-minute clip on YouTube of that one fight scene. And I wish the show was more than that being great. And so I didn't want to be negative on this, but I guess my expectations were that it would be so good, because they had these great characters that we care about and we know, and I think that it was just super lackluster. And so I hope that if they do a Vader show, they lean into more, make it about Vader. Don't bring in someone else like a Reva and try to make them interesting. Just focus on who we actually care about, you know, and give us exactly what we want. And that's what I wish they'd done, and they didn't. But I think if you're a Star Wars fan, one way or the other, you're going to watch this, you're going to have opinion on it, and you know, let us know. We've kind of got a good range here. Like, I feel like I'm super far on the left, Mick's far on the right, Spencer's kind of in the middle, which is good, right? Because this makes it a much more interesting conversation. But I'm glad that people enjoy it, right? Like, I'm glad that, you know, I know some people don't like it, but it seems like the majority of people really enjoyed it. And thought it was really cool, which I agree it was cool. But I just hope that if they do endeavor to do something like this again, that they make it consistently better so the whole experience is good.
Yeah, it seems like the well-rounded thought is potentially writing, potentially acting, potentially, you know, this, potentially that could have made it better. I think we have what we have, and I do think, to your point, I think it's a polarizing season. You know, it's a polarizing series. You're going to have a lot of people who like it, a lot of people who are disappointed with it, and that's okay. I thought that fueled a healthy and good conversation. Honestly, just like we always say to everybody, like, we want to know your thoughts. You know, if you're like Mick and you're like, yo, I honestly really enjoyed this. This was phenomenal. Episode 6 really wrapped up the story really well. Let us know. Let us know the aspects that you liked. If you kind of felt more in line with the disappointment, let us know why. You know, let us know the aspects you didn't like. But I want to just propose, you know, do you guys have anything else to add to Obi-Wan and the series as a whole? Good to go.
Actually, Roger, I want one question.
Yeah,
do you think that Kenobi was better than Boba Fett, like just as a whole, or do you think Boba Fett was better than Kenobi?
I think I think as a whole, Boba Fett was better, and here's why. Because I think that Boba Fett was good for the first 4 episodes. I think it was going in a good direction, and I was actually engaged. And then when they swerved off and started doing Mandalorian stuff, that's when it fell apart. With Kenobi, I feel like the first episode sort of did that same thing that Boba Fett did, where it was heading in the direction that I expected. I was like, okay, they're going to show Obi-Wan. He's going to be really depressed. He's just going to be like getting by. And then after that, it'll start picking up, right? And so I feel like that point where it swerved off came at episode 2 in Kenobi, whereas it came in episode 5 at Boba Fett. I think the ending of Kenobi was much, much better, obviously. But I think what liberated them with Boba Fett was that he was such a minor character. He had, maybe 5 total minutes of screen time in the original trilogy. So while he was a name that we knew, we didn't really know much about him. So that gave them a little bit more creative liberty with him. I think that show was much more disappointing as it ended. I think Kenobi ended a lot better than it. But I think Boba Fett was more consistent for longer. But I think they both. I didn't like either one of them at all. Really, I think Mandalorian.
So are they kind of even in your mind? Like Boba Fett a little bit better, but they're pretty close.
I liked where Boba Fett was going more for longer. And I
gotcha.
I think Spencer actually had a good analogy where the bread was good, but the meat of the sandwich was not very good in Kenobi. I think the first episode, I was fine with it. I was actually excited to kind of see where it went. And then I think the ending was satisfying enough with that fight scene and that interaction between them. But the whole middle part, episodes 2 through 5, I think were horrible. They're unwatchable for me. And I think with Boba Fett, it was like, I actually didn't even mind if you'd taken those 2 Mandalorian episodes out and put them in another Mandalorian season. I think people would have actually been more okay with that show. And then
Totally.
you just cut those out and then made a finale. I think people probably would have liked it more. But I think they tried to do too much with Boba Fett, and I don't think they tried to do enough with Kenobi.
Spenny, do you agree? I feel like we can all agree Mandalorian's the top. Out of the 3 series that Star Wars have releases, Mandalorian's by far the top. My opinion is Kenobi is next, and then Boba Fett. But Spenny, do you think they're closer, or do you think they're farther apart from each other?
No, I think Boba Fett was terrible. I think Boba Fett is last in my opinion. And honestly, to your credit, Roger, they're kind of equal because Boba Fett had 8 episodes. 4 of them were good, 4 of them were terrible. Kenobi had 6 episodes. 3 of them were good, 3 of them were terrible, at least in my opinion. So you can kind of use that analogy to where, in my opinion, it was nice that throughout the season of Kenobi, there were like these moments, because to me it was like episode 1, episode 6, obviously, and then you could debate, was episode 5 the good one? Was episode 3 the good one? The end of episode 3 was good. So there was like kind of these in-between moments that kept me latched throughout the season. Whereas with Boba Fett, the first 4 episodes were so in-depth with their writing and their backstory that I really liked it. But then it was so drastically not Boba Fett that I lost every ounce of interest that I didn't even want to continue the last 4. Whereas Kenobi had bad writing, but there were these moments in between from 1 to 6 rather than 1, 2, 3 being good and then 4, 5, 6 being terrible. And so I think that's why I would put Kenobi second. Also, these are characters that I love. So, like, though I was disappointed overall, I loved seeing Kenobi. I loved seeing Darth Vader. It was intriguing seeing a young Luke and a young Leia, even if their parts weren't really maximized as much as they should have been. So I think that investment allowed me to enjoy it a little bit more. So I would put Mandalorian, Kenobi, and then Boba Fett.
Cool. I was just curious.
I think it was a good question.
Well, and there's so many Star Wars shows coming out. Like, there's a lot of Star Wars content coming out. And, we haven't even talked about the animated shows like Bad Batch and Clone Wars and Rebels and the continuation of that as well. But, I think we're going to see these characters again in some form or other. We're going to get new characters like Taika's doing. And Star Wars, like Spencer said, is such a huge brand. It's probably the most popular brand franchise ever at this point. There's probably some that are somewhat close, like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, but I think Star Wars is just universally loved, so Disney's going to keep creating stories, they're going to keep creating content in this world, so I'm excited to see what they do, but I think for me, this all boils down to my expectations. With Boba Fett, my expectations really weren't that high. With this, it was, and I think that the disproportionate reality to expectations was what caused my disappointment with it. But I do hope we see them again, and I hope they're, in my opinion, done more justice. But I hope that we don't get any more Boba Fetts anymore. What happened there? So, but hey, what I do credit them for is swinging and missing. Right? It's like, let's try Boba Fett. It didn't work. That's fine. Let's try Obi-Wan. It kind of worked. Let's try Mandalorian. It worked. They're rehashing this old franchise that is immortalized, kind of like Vader now. So if you're gonna develop it, you got to take risks, and I'm just more in favor of the Taika Waititi style or Rogue One style, where it's like, let's just create something new. There are no expectations, no ties to old stuff, and let's see what happens. So.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good analogy, or not analogy, but a good overview of Obi-Wan. The series is on Disney Plus. It's available to watch, so watch all 6 episodes like Mick did, all in one day, essentially. Or you could space it out like we did and analyze it. However, let us know your thoughts, and we appreciate you listening. Thank you, Mikk, for joining us. Have a
Absolutely.
good one.
Yep. Thanks, guys.